Hello and welcome to Transforming Worlds.
Is that we cheerlead and champion women until they cross a line. And it's not until you cross the line that you realize, oh, and now I'm too successful, I'm too rich, too smart, whatever it might be. And then the narrative starts to change. Who does she think she is? Like every setback, every mistake, every moment of cringe is a lesson. And I work really hard to try and find those lessons. Of course, sometimes there'll be lessons that I miss and I realize them 5 years later. But that's very much how I think about failure and making mistakes. And I have had and continue to have times where I feel uncertain, I feel vulnerable, I face criticism, but I always try to turn those moments into opportunities to learn.
In today's episode, we speak to Lauren Currie. She's the founder of Upfront, an organization on a mission to change confidence, visibility, and power for 10 million women. Thousands of women from over 50 countries have graduated from their flagship program called the Upfront Bond. Upfront is the world's top choice for women and organizations who are interested in increasing their confidence. Lauren is also a keynote speaker and describes her public speaking approach as everyone in the room will turn their own lights on. She was the chairperson of leading maternity discrimination called Pregnant, Then Screwed for 7 years, and she's been recognized as a woman changing the world by Elle magazine and one of the top business women under 35 by Management Today. In 2017, she was awarded an Order of British Empire for her services to design and diversity. Lauren grew up in Scotland and now lives in Sweden with her partner and her 7-year-old son. Join us in a conversation about cultural design, confidence, the power that each of us holds to change the world, and the trick, that thing that the patriarchy does to all of us, making us think of things in just a way that doesn't feel quite right. I really enjoyed this conversation with Lauren, who I've known for years, and I urge you to take a listen to the things that this wonderful woman has to say. Tune in. Welcome, Lauren Currie, to Transforming Worlds, the Queen of Confidence. How are you today?
Oh, I'm so happy to be here, Carola. Thank you for inviting me.
Every time I speak with you is a joy, and this is no exception. We're going to be talking about transformation, about confidence today. Tell our audience who you are and what's transforming for you these days.
Okay, so I am Lauren Currie, and the transformation that I am working to make happen in the world is I'm building a world that rewards and celebrates confident women. So that means I'm transforming the way women learn confidence, moving it from something that feels elusive and very individual to something that is very practical, shared, and systemic. And so another part of that is I'm on a personal transformation journey to dismantle all of the internalizations of patriarchal, outdated norms in myself and in my leadership and how I show up in the world.
How easy is that on a regular day?
Oh, it's really easy. Easy peasy.
You confident woman.
I've
So
I have chosen a very hard path, a difficult path, but it is the right path for me to be on.
they say that you know you're on the right path when you don't know what the next step is.
Mm.
So if you are certain and you know this is it, this is what I'm doing, then probably it's not the right path for you. Because if you can see it so clearly, you're not enjoying the learning that is hidden in that path, which is actually the real sort of joy of doing it, the present of doing it. But we can't do it without discomfort. What was the discomfort that led you there, that led you to work on confidence and become a catalyst for the change that you're bringing about for so many women in so many places as well?
That's such a good question because I feel like discomfort is something that we should all talk about and think about more. Like this, the idea of discomfort is such a big part of how I think about my work and my leadership, my personal life. Like I'm such a big believer that if you can learn to keep moving forward, even when it feels very uncomfortable, you can do anything. Like you can literally do anything in the world if you are able to master that. I feel like it's the skill that I'm really determined to figure out. And so when I think about the discomfort that triggered Upfront being born, and I'm sure you've heard me tell this story before when I was speaking at the conference and I was the only woman on the stage, and I decided to, from a place of naivety, just didn't understand why I was often the only woman in the room, the youngest woman in the room, the only woman with a regional accent, the only woman who didn't go to a red brick university. I had really believed this myth of meritocracy that we are fed, so I just didn't get it. And the day that I started to ask those questions was the day that I realized women have been very intentionally told that we are the problem, that we are not confident enough, that we are not speaking up enough, that we're not clear enough, we're not assertive enough, we're not smart enough. All of it was being framed as a personal deficit rather than cultural design. And it was that was the moment, like understanding that all of these incredible women around me all over the world are moving through the world, apologizing for existing, apologizing for having opinions, being scared to share their ideas, being ignored, being made to feel invisible. And it made me ask, like, what would happen? How would the world change if we could get every single woman to understand and realize that confidence is not something you're born with? It's not something you either have or you don't have. It's something that you can learn. And what would happen if we all started to learn it together on mass at scale?
Yeah, I think back in the day, and we've known each other from back then, you
Yeah.
know, when you were on stages but not being recognized for your for the fair share of what you brought to the audience and to the community. There's a flip side to that. So there's the side of you being kind of pigeonholed into that sort of womanly place of, well, you're not good enough and you got to prove yourself before you get to be one of the boys. But at the same time, there is something strange there, something that awakens my curiosity, which is you were a magnet at the same time. A lot of the people attending those events were going there because Lauren Currie was talking to us about design. So there
Mm.
was a huge appreciation for this, what you call naive, but this energy of curiosity, of wonder, of possibility, and at the same time, this kind of yeah, as you defined, cultural aspect of saying boxing you in, and it's at this tension that actually Upfront was born because as you were experiencing that, you could see it happening to others. But I think we
Mm.
mustn't forget that there's a, I don't know what the word is, but there's an appreciation that hides in the form of jealousy or in the form of putting others down that needs to be addressed, that needs to be spoken loudly and exposed, so that that in itself as an act of confidence empowers us and empowers others. How was that for you? Did you notice that you also had a this kind of sparkly thing that you were bringing into those conferences? Did you know that about yourself?
I think it's so lovely and special for me to have a conversation like this with someone who knew me well then. Um, so I feel like I want to ask you lots of questions and
Ask
talk.
me, ask me, ask, no problem. But I really want your answer on this one because I think that that is one of the driving forces of confidence in general, of you in particular, but of confidence in general.
So it's interesting for me because hindsight is obviously a wonderful thing, as the saying goes. Now, at the time, I was running Snook. Snook was one of the very first service design for social change agencies. I co-founded Snook with a business partner, and my job was very much to be the evangelist, the inspire people, like, let's let the world know that we can use design in this way. Because, of course, as you know, it was still a very, service design was a very emerging discipline at that time. And I started that business when I was 23. And when I look back at the rooms that I was in, the conferences that I spoke at, I can now see that, and I've had, for example, Lisa Lindstrom, who's a good friend of mine, who founded Doberman, one of the big agencies, design agencies in Scandinavia. She tells me the story of the first time she saw me on stage at the Service Design Network conference, and
Mm,
that being a huge moment for her to
yeah.
sit up and say, wait a minute, what are these two young girls are doing in Scotland? I need to pay attention to that. Like, I want my agency to start, they were starting to think about it as well. And that was how we got to know each other. And so I now can see that I was bringing a huge amount of freshness.
Yes,
I was
that's the
bringing
word.
freshness and energy, and that was coming from, and it's that classic thing, right? I didn't know that at the time, because for me, I'm 24, 25, and I'm like, I want to build a business. I want to change the world. I want people to buy our services. I want people to take me seriously. So I was probably unaware of the power of that freshness. I think there was also circumstances where, like, there's moments where I just cringe and think, oh my goodness, I remember I spoke at a police conference, 'cause of course one of our first products that we built was for police services. And I think I said at the end of my speech, like, please, please just buy this so that I can afford to buy more shoes. God, I was so embarrassed. Like, but I was, because I was wearing high heels every time I gave a
And
speech.
tartan.
That was, and tartan. And I'm sure that lots of people had opinions about that at the time. But
Well, I
I,
don't know. Don't be so hard on yourself because I
yeah, I
think
don't
that
know. I don't know
what
either.
came across is exactly freshness. And I think that Lisa got that right, sort of
Yeah.
conveying that to you at that time. I've only just said it now for the first time here live for everyone to hear,
Yeah.
um, which is there was this unapologetic, not sorry, love for what you were doing, which was very contagious,
Yeah.
which most of us already practicing design were feeling a bit sheepish about it, a bit like, well, I do this, but I'm not telling anyone it's called design because they won't appreciate it, they won't understand it, or they're going to put us in the box of the creatives that don't count, like their opinions are cute but not assertive enough. And so you were standing on stages, you were bringing this message across, you were bringing it as enthusiasm and as something that you wanted to really sort of bring about and dedicate your life to. And while, of course, I understand how cringy that is, but we all have that within ourselves, this sort of cringy, fallen madly in love with a
Oh, of
possibility or
course.
a discipline that culture, because you talked about social design, has shamed us into not sharing.
Of course. I
And you
think,
were out there unapologetically doing this before you had invented the not sorry jar. So for the audience, whenever we say we're sorry, we put money into a jar. This energy is contagious. It's important.
Mhm.
It connects our tummies and our hearts. And that is a part of confidence as well.
Yeah.
I've seen you all this time go through the process, have the couch, the upfront couch. You should tell us this story. And I've seen you struggle at moments of hesitation because it's literally at times it was one woman against a huge cultural narrative. But
Mm.
at the same time, because of that sparkly eyed happiness, you broke through. So
Mm.
tell us about the couch.
The couch. So the couch was the first formation of Upfront. So we talked about that day I was at a conference in Bristol, And I think it was 2016, and I was the only woman on the program. It was a design conference, and I was there with my friend Amy. And I remember so clearly, Amy and I were sitting up on the back row, just looking round at all these. The audience was full of women from all different design disciplines, all walks of life. And we were muttering and whispering to each other, like, what is going on? Like, why am I the only woman that's going to be on the stage? And I decided to do the the hard thing, the risky thing, which I said to her, I'm going to call it out when I'm up there. And I had the voice saying the organizers are going to be upset at you. You know, they were paying me to be there and be a speaker. And I wasn't doing it from a place of trying to shame them or make them feel bad. But I was like, I have to say something because I have been complaining about this for years, and I need to do something about it. I always love how Swiss Miss Tina Ross Eidenberg, she says, you're allowed to complain 3 times, then you have to try and fix it. So I always try and abide by that rule best I can. And so when I was up on the stage, I said, like, what is this about? Why am I the only woman on this stage? And I put a post-it note in the toilets, in the women's toilets, that said, talk to me about being on stage. Tweet me. So my phone was on fire with lots of tweets, and there was lots of people queuing up to speak to me. And they were telling me all sorts of stories about why they're so scared of public speaking, why they would never speak in public, about the teacher that told them they would never amount to anything, about the mum that thinks they shouldn't have gone into design, about the shitty boss that, all these different stories. And I was so struck by, like, wow, this is a really complicated problem. Like, that was the day that I started to just scratch the surface of this is a systemic complex problem because it's rooted in inequality. Like, there's no simple fix.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, with my designer hat on, I was hearing the patterns and the insights. And the pattern I kept hearing was, I would never stand up there. You could not get me to stand up there for any, there was like, no, people like me don't go on a stage. And I thought, okay, so in our professional lives, when we want to learn a new skill, when we want to try something new, we practice, we get a mentor, we shadow somebody, we go on a course, we find a way to learn how to do that thing. When you want to become a public speaker, you can't, what do? You have to be on stage and speak.
Yes.
There's no bit in between.
Yeah.
So I wanted to design the bit in between. I wanted to design a safe way for people to experience being on a stage in a way that wasn't scary. And so the idea that I came up with was, let's put a big red sofa beside me when I give my talk, and people with stage fright can sit on that couch and understand that audiences are kind, that awkwardness is not fatal, and that eventually your heart rate does slow down and it can actually be quite a pleasant experience being on stage. And so I decided, I had a speech coming up, excuse me, at a conference called Silicon Beached, and the event organizer, Matt Desmere, and I've still got the email that I sent him saying, I've had this idea, I want to bring people on stage with me. Do you think you could get me a couch? And he wrote back and said, you're crazy, but sure, let's do it. And so we sent an email to the 300 people who'd bought a ticket and said, do you have stage fright? Would you like to come on stage with Lauren? You won't be asked to speak at any time. Lauren will explain what the Upfront couch is all about and why you're there. And so long story short, we ended up with like 20 people who wanted to sit on the stage. So we had to get deck chairs and make more seats. And it was just an extraordinary thing because then I could speak to the people who sat on the stage, and some of them just did a total 360 of like, this is nothing like what I thought it was going to be. And I've been able to get close to a speaker and realize that speakers are also nervous. And I've been able to talk to these other people who are also scared of the idea of being on stage. And at that point, It was called Upfront, which I wrote on a post-it note and stuck on the front of my red notebook and took a photograph. That was the logo. There was no business plan, there was no strategy, there was nothing other than every time I give a talk, I'm going to have this couch on stage with me. And then as it kind of gained momentum, I was like, okay, let's package it so that people like you and my network were saying, I'll have the couch on stage with me. And we had amazing speakers from all over the design industry, conferences all over the world. My mum made Upfront cushion covers. So we used to post the cushion covers to the conference so they could put them on the Upfront couch. And that's what Upfront was for like 2 years. Just a thing that happened when people gave talks, and it really, really, really made a huge difference for the people who sat on the couch. Some of them went on to give talks themselves. And of course, when I would have debriefs with them, a lot of them were like, okay, Lauren, like this has been great, but do you have a book or a course or a podcast? And I was like, no, because I was running my other business at the time. And
Yes.
so when I looked online to see what options were there, of course, this is when I saw the huge opportunity, huge gap in the market to turn Upfront into an education company, which led to me building the Bond, which is now our flagship product. And yeah, that's how we started.
You make it sound so easy. Still, the journey there was also a journey of discovery and always sort of led by a design process of some kind, right? So, an understanding that there was something that needed to be addressed and finding the right click and the right manner to address it so that A, you could honor the depth of the issue, and B, you could create something that was of value to others. But Upfront went through several iterations to get where it is today. What was that process like? What were your kind of main pivotal points or milestones in that journey?
So if we fast forward to now, that was nearly the story I've just told was nearly 10 years ago. And it was the couch, then it evolved into a workshop. So I used to run one-day workshops around public speaking, presence, confidence, communication. And then I started to understand if I really want to impact millions of women, this needs to be digital. It needs to be online because there's only one of me and only 30 people can fit in this room. So it was becoming clear that I wasn't able to scale. Then for a long time, I was just totally unconvinced. I was like, oh, well, the dream's over because it would never work online. And I remember having coffee with a friend of mine who said, you do realize the fastest growing industry, like education space online right now, is fitness. And he was like, if people can teach people how to transform their physical bodies through a screen, you can do this through a screen. And I heard that and decided he was probably right. So I wanted to build an online course. And so the first iteration of that course was 6 weeks, a 6 week course. We had a Facebook group and I used a platform called Podia. I hired a local student to come to my living room and film me creating these educational videos. And that was the first iteration of what is now the Bond. And so since then, I wasn't called the Bond then. So Bond is the collective noun for a group of women. So every cohort is its very own Bond. As you know, Carola, you were in Bond 8 and Bond 9 have just graduated. We'll have Bond 10 this autumn. And so since then, we have had 11,000 women go through go through a bond and become bonders. And we are building bonds in different verticals for different types of women. So we are building a leadership bond, a financial literacy bond, a personal branding bond. We have a bond for founders and freelancers. And my vision is that Upfront becomes the place where women come to learn. And no matter what you want to learn, there will be a bond to help you learn that. So big milestones for me. I mean, it becoming the bond it didn't feel big at the time. At the time, I was like, I need a name for this because like course, community, group is all a bit meh. You know, the designer in me wanted it to have a brand and an identity. So becoming the bond was a milestone. We also launched our very first conference 2 years ago, the
Mm.
Up Centre conference. Last year we had that in Birmingham, and Nicola Sturgeon was one of our keynote speakers, which was a huge moment for me. We've also launched bonds for specific sectors. So we have a charity bond for women who work and volunteer for charities. We have a government bond. And the charity bond feels like a huge milestone for me because we have been able to impact so many women in the sector. So our next charity bond starts in a few weeks. And yesterday, my team were telling me that National Trust, which is one of the biggest environmental charities in the UK, has enrolled nearly 500 people. And that's
Woohoo!
just one charity.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Really starting to have significant impact in a sector that is predominantly women. They are predominantly underpaid, under-resourced. The demand for their services is the highest it's ever been. I think it's just I'm just really proud of the work that we're doing in charities.
I think it's excellent and it ties everything together because I think having seen the whole process and then become a bonder myself, I think one of the big things is that the cultural narrative tells us either or. So you're either a good citizen, a good corporate, a good employee, even a good entrepreneur, and you get on with business and carry on and ask no questions, or you are learning, progressing, questioning, looking for possibilities for yourself. And I think that your story and that of the bonds is one of you can actually do these things in parallel. You can actually start because it started as a side hustle, and you can start by learning and then integrating that and weaving that into your everyday work. And this example of the charity is extraordinary because in the charity world, and we've had Donnie McLurkin on the podcast, who is the founder of the Post-Growth Institute. And we talked quite a bit about activism. If activism takes on the patriarchal narrative, then we think that we have to fight for things. And that is not the case. So when we bring confidence into activism, the whole narrative changes. The whole way of doing changes. One person at a time, mainly women within Upfront, one woman at a time. But as we start exposing these things, changing our behaviors, changing our own narrative, understanding what is possible and becoming that, then we can be the ones that are bringing this confidence into whichever sector this is. And I love that. I think that charity lends itself very much for this. Let's talk about the people and the things that inspire you. And I want to zoom into Nicola Sturgeon. And I think not everybody knows who she is. I mean, it is a small country up north after all. So tell us about her and what inspires you about her and who else inspires you.
So Nicola Sturgeon was the First Minister of Scotland for many years, and she was also an MSP for an area in the south side of Glasgow. And I think what inspires me about Nicola is she has been in my orbit since I was very, very young. So when I think about the women leaders that I could see and hear on the TV, in the newspaper, leaders that my mum and dad would talk about at the dinner table,
Mm.
it was Nicola Sturgeon. And now that I am older and do the work that I do, and of course I had the huge honor of meeting her and interviewing her, she has had to battle so much sexism and judgment and double standards. And she just consistently shows up with grace and honesty and clarity and stability. And we saw this so much during the COVID-19 crisis. And she's actually just released her memoir, frankly, which I'm so excited to read. Um, so I'm very inspired by Nicola. I'm also very inspired by Taylor Swift.
Ah, yes,
Uh-huh.
it's true.
I mean, I struggle to articulate the impact that her story and her music has had on me. And I think it comes down to this, that similar with Nicola, that she has been so deeply scrutinized, belittled, mocked, vilified every day for doing the very same things that men in her same position are celebrated for. And she is constantly called manipulative, fake, too much, not enough, too this, too that, but yet she just keeps evolving, keeps showing up, and she is able to stay grounded and true to who she is, whilst now becoming one of the most successful, if not the most successful female artist of our time, one of the most visible women in the world. And I just think it's absolutely astonishing to watch how she time and time again reclaims the narrative, the way she fought to get ownership of her music, the way she fought back against traits that weren't serving artists in the music industry. I feel like she turns her pain into power. And that I just think she's a masterclass in storytelling and confidence, but not the confidence that's about standing on a stage. She's also fantastic at that, but the confidence that stands in the constant waves of misogyny and internalized misogyny that are trying to take her down every day. In fact, this at the start of this year,
Mm.
I decided that I'm going to build a Swift strategy bond so that I can study her entrepreneurship, because I think there's so much in the world about her music and her craft, but there's not very much knowledge about her entrepreneurship and her
Mm.
business acumen,
Mm.
how she builds brands, how she builds communities, how she tells stories. And I think that me and any woman who's trying to make change in the world, who's building a business, who's building a product, can learn so much from how she does things.
This
So
is so important. Yeah.
I'm super excited to build the Swift strategy bond. And ultimately, she just keeps going, even when she's misunderstood. And that is really inspiring to me, because I think that's like it's really easy to cheerlead and champion women who are at the start of their journey. I'm going to do this thing. I want to do this great thing. And everybody's, yeah, go, go, go. But when you get that thing, when you achieve that thing, it changes. And there's a song that I love by Sophia Isela, and the lines are, everybody wants you to love yourself until you actually do. And that to me feels like the very present theme of confidence that we really need to look at and start to talk about, is that we cheerlead and champion women until they cross a line. And it's not until you cross the line that you realize, oh, and now I'm too successful, I'm too rich, too smart, whatever it might be. And then the narrative starts to change. Who does she think she is? You know, we saw it with 𝙏𝙧𝙖𝙣𝙨 at the BAFTAs, all over the headlines, saying that she was mean to her staff. It's like the world's obsessed with, is she a bitch or not? Like, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah. So the other person I mentioned is Adrienne Marie Brown, and I think that I found her work via you and a book that is called Emergent Strategy. Is that right?
Okay. I don't know. I don't know her work.
Okay. Oh, it's amazing. Okay, I'll edit that out. So, making a note. Yeah, it was part of. I think it was part of the bond. Okay. Fabulous. I think that the Swift strategy is something so inspiring as well. I mean, even if you haven't crossed the line yet, it's being aware that you will at some point and that this will have impact at some point. And if anything, and I've seen it through all these years of knowing you and the people that you have looked up to and who have inspired you in your journey, and there are many. I mean, we just mentioned Taylor Swift and Nicola Sturgeon, as different as they are, and
Yeah.
there's so many others in between as well, is persistence, is really truly believing in what it is that you're doing, and any level of impact will do. Because if the impact is big, then that kind of fuels your need to keep going. And if the impact is small, it fuels your need to keep trying to
Yeah.
continue to spread that impact. And it's so important that we keep supporting each other in that, because what we're supporting is not the woman as such. We're supporting the cause, the impact that she is trying to make through her work. Necessarily, the narrative around us wants to normalize, wants us to be either or, so very much focus on duality. What does that look like for you, whether failure is self-perceived, probably not real, or imposed from the outside of you being a failure? How do you build resilience through that? What are your practices?
Failure, for me, I refuse to think of myself as a failure. Like, I just don't do that. I think I've never failed, I've only learned. Like, every setback, every mistake, every moment of cringe is a lesson. And I work really hard to try and find those lessons. Of course, sometimes there'll be lessons that I miss and I realize them 5 years later. But that's very much how I think about failure and making mistakes. And I have had and continue to have times where I feel uncertain, I feel vulnerable, I face criticism, but I always try to turn those moments into opportunities to learn, to grow, to understand myself better. So I think a good example of this, and this is one that you will remember because you were there, which is when I first started showing up online. I did all of it under a pseudonym, which when I tell people that now, they don't believe me and they think this is hilarious. And I'm like, no, I promise that I was so scared to show my face online. My avatar was a picture of my fingernail, and my name online was Red Jotter, which essentially is like red notebook in Scottish. And so I hid because I was scared of what others would think, what they would say. And at the time, I thought it was easier to hide than face that judgment. Now, of course, it took me many years, but I eventually got to a place where I understood that being myself and being open and being honest is what resonates with people and communities more than anything. So the decision to hide behind a pseudonym, it was a reflection of that fear, that fear of judgment. And in facing that fear, it has enabled me to show up very persistently
Yeah.
and stand tall in who I am and what I believe in and what I care about in a way that I think has really deeply connected with many, many people. So I did try and hide, but I don't see it as a failure. I see it as like that was a step that I had to go through to get me to a place where I could own my voice and my story and my confidence the way that I do today.
Which is great because it means you can take up space, you can color in your story, you can tell your story, you can shape it, you can design your life, you can make decisions as to where you live, who you live with, and how you live your life. But at the same time, the outside has an opinion about that, and they might consider it a failure. How do you deal with that?
So I have a few people in my life that I could count on one hand where it really matters to me what they think. And if one of them were to come to me and say, I think you've really fucked up, that would be a big deal. Anybody else outside of that who wants to tell me that I failed or made a mistake or done something wrong doesn't really matter.
Yeah, I think one of the things that defines you in that space is also your honesty. I don't know if this is a Scottish trait, Probably it is to some degree. Of saying, if you're going to measure me with that measuring stick, let's use it for you and then have a conversation. So you tend to, and by honesty, I mean like the radical kind, the no bullshit kind. It's like, okay, fine, fine. You want me to take your feedback seriously? Fine, but you need to take it seriously too. And then that creates that space where you can take up space and you can give significance to what is happening, because it becomes much more based on values, much than on external metrics, fantasies, social constructs, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I think that that's one of the most refreshing things, to go back to that word of freshness in your approach. Your approach is playful, but pretty darn serious when it comes down to what the are we doing and what are we doing it for? Like, let's get real and level right here. But it's very powerful, because if everyone would do this, this would be a much better world.
I think too, Carola. This is what I keep saying.
I know. But we're all going into the trick. What's the trick?
The trick is, do I have it here? No, I don't. The trick is what children call the patriarchy. And I have just written a children's book called When Taylor Meets the Trick, to teach young children, that's age 3 to 8, how to spot the patriarchy and to understand when you're being tricked. So the book is based on my son's experience of being a young boy who has long blonde curly hair, which is now nearly down to his waist. And so people often think that he's a girl. And in those moments, that could become a moment of shame for him. Why do they think I'm a girl? Maybe I should have short hair. But because we've been talking to him about the trick since he was 2, he immediately laughs it off and says, oh, that person's been tricked, because they think that there's rules for what hair boys can have and what hair girls can have, when the truth is there are no rules. So when we watch a movie in our house, when the movie finishes, we look at each other and say, where did we see the trick? And we'll say, well, all of the people who were driving the helicopters were men. All the women who were looking after the baby, all the people who were looking after the babies were women. And it happened as this morning going to school, my son had an appointment with the school nurse yesterday. And I said to him, how did the appointment with the nurse go? What did she say? And I was tricked, because that nurse could have been a man. And so he spotted me and said, you were tricked. So it's a very powerful, effective way for children to understand all the ways that they're being tricked. And in the book, the trick is a black squiggly creature that sits on your shoulder and wriggles into your tummy and wriggles into your heart. And when you look at it and you realize you've been tricked, it starts to disappear. And so I am writing a series of books. The next book is about a young girl called Olivia who wants to play football, and her dad has been tricked. Keeps telling her that only boys play football. So the book is about her dad realizing that he's been tricked. And I really believe that we need the trick more than ever before in these times, because there is rising violence against women, male violence. There is rising misogyny online. There is rising right-wing narratives around gender. And yes, the book is for children, but really the exciting bit for me is the grown-ups and the grandparents and the adults who will be around those stories.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversations that will start in living rooms and bedrooms and kitchen tables around being tricked. Because building Upfront, and my partner also works for Upfront, so we are an Upfront household. This is our job, this is our work, it's what we talk about and learn about and think about all day, every day. And our 7-year-old is telling both of us different ways we're being tricked often that we haven't noticed.
I'm sure he's going to show you more tricks than just the gender trick. I mean, you are living in a culture that is foreign to you and your partner. You're seeing all kinds of constructs that keep revealing all of these layers of outdated ideas that we seem to sort of, push back into each other's worlds, and I'm sure that your child will help you see so much more than this first layer, which is indeed gender based.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and it's great work that you're doing. You go into nature almost every day, and you, at some point in your life, you picked up running and swimming in cold water. Why?
Yes. Why would you do such a crazy thing?
Yes.
Well, the short answer is because I moved to Sweden. I think Sweden has been a deep source of frustration for me in many ways, but it has given me the gift of nature, becoming fit, moving my body. And I think a lot of that is to do with me feeling safe here in a way that I've never felt safe in different parts of the UK that I have lived. And so it started with running, and then of course they have the culture here of swimming in the cold water, then going in the sauna. And so the place that we lived in before we moved to Uppsala. So unfortunately, I've moved to a small city, so I don't have the nature and the rivers on my doorstep anymore. But for the last 2 years before we moved here, I swam in the lake every day, most days, all year round. I actually ended up running the Stockholm Marathon, which is wild because anybody that knows me will know when we moved to Sweden, I didn't even have sneakers. It's like I was a person that wanted to be sitting down at all times. Like I don't want to go a walk. I don't want to
And definitely not jumping into the loch. So
exactly. And it was the cold water one in particular. And I actually created a podcast about it myself because it felt like a real moment in my own confidence journey because I was very physically scared. Like I did not want to do it.
yes, I
And
remember
I
you took on cycling as well.
Yeah, I remember driving to the lake and
Yeah.
with my two friends, and they were really used to it and going in and out. And I was already thinking, I'll just hold their jackets. I'll tell them I've got a sore tummy. Like I was making up all these stories so I could get myself out of it.
Mm.
And it took a good couple of hours of me standing on the steps, one step at a time. And it was March, it wasn't that cold. Now that I've been in water in the minus temperatures in an ice hole, like it really wasn't cold, but it was my first time and I really needed my friends to be holding my hand and reminding me I was okay and doing the deep breaths with me. And I couldn't have done it. It really was
Community effort.
yeah, like my confidence came from my community being beside me. And then I just got a bit addicted to it. Like there's lots of science that is starting to come out now that shows us it's very, very good for you. Like cold water immersion resets your mood. It is really good for your heart. It's really good for your skin. And you get such a buzz, you get such a rush. So I started to get a bit addicted to it and really enjoyed it. And I do miss it.
Mm. So let's try and bring everything together. This is
Okay.
this is a cool exercise.
Okay.
You are multi-talented and you see potential in so many things. You manage to do it in a way that is still focused to your mission. Like it's not, you don't get distracted, which is something that I've always valued and sort of in a way admired and been slightly jealous of in you. I mean, like many of us in design, you love to illustrate. But then it's like you give in to that, and suddenly before you know it, you're illustrating and writing a children's book. You really are determined for the cause of transforming confidence, and my cause is transformation of everything and anything, because I believe we're in a change of paradigm, in a moment where things are changing from the root, radically from the root. But for you, it's like you are able to bring this focus to your mission, and you've brought your family into it. I mean, initially your parents, later on your partner, now even your kid is participating on this. So as all of this momentum that you're gathering starts, building, what is the future in the ideal world of Lauren Currie? What does it look like if we were to fast forward, say, 20, 50 years? What might the world, what is the society, the legacy that you're leaving for your son and others of their generation?
Such important questions. And I think ultimately, if and when we build a world that celebrates confident women, that world will be more equal. And, there's lots of ways that will manifest itself. But if I think about the timeline of that, so in 5 years, the bond will be a rite of passage for every young woman. Like, I want every young woman to have experienced a bond, be part of a bond in some way. In 20 years, we want to have confidence education embedded in school systems. And in 50 years, when we have this world where confidence is celebrated and appreciated, there will be no need for the bond anymore. And the future generations will say they ended the confidence gap, they built a confidence revolution. And that changed the world. And it's a world now that celebrates confident women, because that's the problem that we're here to solve. The problem isn't that women and girls don't have confidence. We do have it, and then somebody or something takes it away. The problem is we live in a world that does not like confident women, that is unkind to confident women. And that is what we're changing.
Yeah, and it matters a lot. And it's through women, but it's not just for women. And that needs to be said out loud for the other half of our audience, or 1/3 of our audience, depending how they gender identify. That the confidence in women is precisely because that's where it's gone missing, and it's a process of repair. It's not seeking an unfair advantage in any way. And I know this from within the bond, because many of the bonders struggle with this at home. As they go into the bond, they're having lots of discussions at the dinner table with their partners as to why this is even necessary. And it's necessary because it's a quest from women for all of us. It's not to the detriment of men or of anyone else. So you've managed to build an incredible community, and a community that has the freedom to interpret this and understand it in their own way and bring it into their own spaces, which I think is also the strength of it. Yeah. So tell me, where can people find you, and where can they find your work? We're going to add that to the show notes.
Yeah, so I am very active on LinkedIn. I write on there every day about confidence, entrepreneurship, leadership. So you can find me at Lauren Currie. I'm also on Instagram at Lauren Currie. You can find Upfront at weareupfront.com, at Upfront Global. My children's book will be available to buy in September. And I would really, really love to hear from your lovely listeners. I would love to hear what you've taken away from this conversation, what it's made you think about. If you have any questions for me, or even if you've just simply enjoyed it, please do send me a note and say hello, because I always love to hear from you.
Yeah, it is lovely to hear from people. It's true. I enjoy that a lot. I mean, in the meantime, I've made friends within my listening community, so imagine that. So the last question of the podcast comes from a book that you know well, which is Change Ahead, which I wrote a long time ago.
Yes, I have it in my book right in front of me.
Cool. And in it, I say, when we're facing the unknown, we can't have answers. So then our journey becomes a quest for questions. In everything we do, there is a next question that is emerging. What is yours?
How do we dismantle internalized misogyny?
Yeah. Good question, Laura. Good question. And we're working on so many levels to try and, unlock that and understand the next question and the next question that emerges from that, because it doesn't stop there. That's just the first way in, and then a next question will arise. So thank you so much for spending time with us.
I'd
And
love
for being so candid.
Of course, you ask such beautiful questions, and I feel really proud of us.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah. We always have so much fun having these discussions, and we can explore the depths of things. So that's, I'm very grateful for that. Thank you so much. And we'll put everything into the show notes, and be well. Bye bye.